Hi, and thank you for clicking on Pain to Power, a call for HOA reform. If you are new to this platform, please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow. I am going to continue following this homeowner story in Grand Junction associated with an ongoing legal battle in which she purchased a lot out in Grand Junction where there was no HOA on her deed or her plat. Then her 6 homeowners formed an HOA without her knowledge while she was an owner, and then shortly thereafter turned around and sued her without notice and due process for over $600,000 in legal fees, fines, and violations. If you have not watched my previous videos, please make sure to do so. The most important one I think to watch that will make all of this, help you with making this make sense, is the last video I posted, part 3. I also want to call out that everything I'm sharing in these videos is based on my opinion, and I am not an attorney. So anything that I am stating here should not be taken as legal advice. In terms of my opinion, I do want to state that I have spent hours and hours investigating this case, reading transcripts, reviewing public documents, looking at videos, pictures. The amount of time and effort that I have put into this, honestly, my head hurts, my brain hurts from this. But it is so necessary because, as I've said, the deeper I go, the darker it gets. In terms of the theme of this video today, my question to everybody out there is, do you think that this homeowner is a victim of organized crime, more specifically RICO and racketeering? So I think the best place that we can start in terms of what we need to do to get to the point where you may be able to answer that question is look at the timeline. If there are areas that I haven't addressed that would give you more clarity to help you get to that conclusion, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to try to do that work and answer those questions. My hope is that this case is either investigated by a regulatory commission or covered by a news reporter, because I, for one, would really love to hear what the other side has to say. And I would love to see what documents they can produce to prove ownership associated with this homeowner's land, which is really where I think the core issue of this case should focus in on, is what I believe is deed fraud. I currently have some investigations. Some investigations are currently in flight, and I'm in talks with some investigative reporters. I also have investigation packets and reporter packets. So if anybody out there is interested in seeing those and knowing what questions you should be asking to whom, please reach out to me at pain2power@yahoo.com. With that being said, I think the best place to jump off here is to go back to the timeline, which I have had updated. So if you look at the timeline in front of you, there's some facts that I have reviewed in the previous video. I will circle back to those events, but where I want to focus in on is the easement deed recorded May 20th, 2022. My firm belief and opinion is that deed fraud did absolutely occur in this case. I want to give some more information on deeds and property ownership for those of you who, aren't aware. I mean, I actually had to do some research just to get clarity in my own head. But essentially, on May 20th, 2022, this easement deed was recorded in Mesa County Recorder's Office, in which the newly formed HOA, the HOA management company, the sheriff deputy, a number of individuals believe that this easement deed shows ownership of the homeowner's property and gave them all these rights to do all these things associated with her property. Well, in terms of a deed, the way that you want to think about a deed, I did some research, is think of a deed as a documented action, and that it really facilitates the transfer of ownership. So it's not actually, the deed itself doesn't transfer the ownership of the property. But what happens is once you get a deed, then you need to do a transfer of title. and it's the title that proves the ownership and the associated plat. So to simplify, I came across this analogy that I thought was great, is if you're imagine the deed as gift wrapping paper, and the title is the actual gift inside. The wrapping deed serves its purpose once and is then discarded, where the gift, the title, remains, meaning that the title is what actually proves the ownership of the property. And then the plat actually defines and shows what exactly it is that you own. I'm going to tell you, I've done a title search on this homeowner's property. Never once in that title search anywhere does Bob ever show up that he ever owned any portion of this homeowner's property. And number two, the newly formed HOA does not show up as an owner of any form in any way of this homeowner's property. In addition, the plat does not show any information on any property associated with this homeowner's that's been peeled off whereby the HOA or Bob ever owned this property. This is not rocket science. It would not take an investigator that long to look at the title documents, the plat, Colorado law, Mesa County Planning Department rules and regulations that state you can't subdivide a property of like this homeowner's of 3 acres to even do such a thing. I mean, this is just unheard of. So in addition to that information, which is laws of our state and federal law and just, I don't know, real estate 101, I guess you could say, you can all Google this stuff. So in addition to that, it goes back to why in the world would a newly formed HOA or this group of people be involved with recording a fraudulent deed, if indeed they did knowingly do this? Well, per Colorado law, for an HOA to form, you need property insurance on common space. And these folks, in order to form an HOA, needed common space. And because those roads were handed over to Mesa County, there was no common space. So there was some value to this HOA, I guess you could call it cause, for this HOA to want to have ownership of this homeowner's a portion of her property or any property, so they could claim it common space and secure property insurance, which is required again by the state of Colorado to register as an HOA. So this deed is then recorded, and it appears, based on the documents that I have read, the following month, the HOA director agrees to a private interest-free loan for the HOA for $10,000. And then the HOA agrees to a $20,000 assessment, $30,000 in total. And the August income statement for the HOA shows the same as well, with a separate line item for legal fees. So this assessment was not for legal fees. This assessment also was not defined. So if the HOA is newly formed, has 206 square feet of common space they're claiming they own, what was that assessment for? I don't know. I might think that that assessment might be for $30,000 to pay Bob for the property that he sold them that he really didn't own. And you could probably follow the money to confirm that. It wouldn't be that hard to do. And if that's the truth, do you think Bob filed taxes on that amount of money for that property that he sold, that it's showing nowhere, anywhere that he owned any part of that property? So then this leads to the HOA management company shortly thereafter showing up at the property without notice, ripping out this homeowner's fencing. Now, if this was indeed deed fraud, which again, I don't think it's that hard to prove, and these folks showed up at her property and rips out of her fencing, I do think her civil rights were violated. I think this could have potentially been illegal seizure of property in terms of the deed fraud, in terms of the fencing. And so let's just move on down this timeline as I highlight the significant events. Then I'm going to back up, and then I'm going to show all the events that occurred around these highlighted yellow events. And my hope is by the time I'm done here, you will be able to answer that question on if you think this homeowner is a victim of organized crime. Okay, now we are going to move into the second slide. For those of you that are wondering, yes, the lighting has changed. I actually needed to stop last night and rethink my strategy on how I was going to tell this story so it was understandable and consumable. So this is the morning sun coming up. So for any of you that were wondering or might be wondering what's going on, I thought I'd solve the mystery for you. So I'm going into the second slide. Essentially what you see here is I've highlighted some yellow dates that are significant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what occurred on those dates. And then after I'm done, I'm going to then go back and go through the timeline of all the events so you can get the big view of all the events that have occurred that I think is really necessary to answer the question on if you think organized crime has occurred here. If you look at the chart and you see July 29th through August 2nd, 2022, what occurred here was that the other 6 neighbors and homeowners all took an action to vote to form the HOA and to become a member of the HOA. This is actually required per Colorado law. So each one of them went through, signed off. This is all public record as well. You can look these documents up, look at these dates. And they all voted to form this HOA. This was notarized, certified, and then on August 3rd, once they had all the needed votes, which by the way included everyone except for the homeowner that's being sued, she wasn't even aware this was going on. She was never provided an opportunity to even vote. Obviously, her answer to the question would have been no, she's not joining this HOA. But she's just not even included in the process. I've not even seen, there's really no documentation that she was even aware of this. And then August 3rd, once they had all those votes notarized, they then turned around and they recorded this. They recorded the membership. I believe this might have been with Mesa County. And they then registered with the Secretary of State, which again, by law, was required for them to even form as an HOA and register with the Secretary of State. So they went through the required process. They registered with the Secretary of State on August 3rd, and then they wasted no time at all. And around 5 p.m. that evening, they filed a lawsuit against this homeowner for over $600,000 in fines, fees, and violations. And by the way, I have looked at those fines. They're daily fines, which again violates Colorado law. But what do you think is the problem here with this timeline? If they filed and registered with the Secretary of State and recorded their membership votes on August 3rd, there is no way that they can sue this homeowner retroactively for fines that were incurred before the HOA was even a valid entity. Look at the documentation. This is all recorded. You can't make this stuff go away. It is not possible for them to sue this homeowner, I'm going to repeat it again, for fines, fees, and violations that occurred before August 3rd. It is also not possible for her to incur $600,000 in fines, fees, and violations from the time that they recorded their votes to become an HOA and register with the Secretary of State, probably in the early afternoon, to 5 o'clock on that same day when they filed this lawsuit. Again, this is all recorded information. Then what occurs after they file the lawsuit on August 3rd, she then gets served on August 6th. Apparently somebody came and threw a package over her fence and it landed in her gated yard area. I don't know if that's legal. I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. So Then obviously she retains a lawyer, and that's going to be a whole nother segment of this story. And come November 22nd, the lawyer says to the HOA and the HOA lawyer, hey, you guys, you messed up here. The timeline and the time frame associated to when you formed as an HOA and when you served her the lawsuit does not compute and doesn't make sense. You can't sue her for violations, fines, and fees that incurred prior to that date. It's just not possible. So then what you see, if you look at the Secretary of State records, is November 2022, there's all this activity going on. It looks like some HOA board members, I believe the HOA management company, and I believe the HOA lawyer started to file documents with the Secretary of State, backdating and using names that are similar to the HOA name, but are slightly changed. And then after that occurred, then suddenly the claim was, oh no, we formed January 2022. Again, this is all public record. You can start to pull when and if, actually, I should say, I can't imagine that this is not going to at some point be investigated. So when, I should say, the time that this gets investigated, you can easily pull all that documentation, see what they did. And in my opinion, it looks like there was a concerted effort to backdate these documents to justify this lawsuit because they realized they had no grounds to file this lawsuit. So there was all this smoke and mirrors, in my opinion, that was done to backdate documents to justify the lawsuit. In my opinion, it was a coordinated effort to manipulate the system. So they then do this trickery-dickery-do, and then this goes to court the next month, I believe, for a review, a request around the judge granting a temporary injunction against this homeowner. And actually that does indeed occur. So the following month, December 2022, the judge grants a temporary injunction against this homeowner, which is still in place to this day. Okay, that was a lot. So I am now going to back up to the beginning of the time frame, and I'm going to walk through all the events that have occurred, because again, you want to take these highlighted yellow events and now put that in context to the full timeline. I think once we go through that, my hope is you should have enough information to come to the conclusion if this woman's a victim of organized crime, and more importantly, should somebody be doing an investigation here? I for one, would love to hear from folks on answering those two questions. And if you can't answer those questions, or you feel like there's something more that I need to cover or research, please let me know. I, for one, would love to hear the other side of the story. And I think the only way that's going to occur is through a formal investigation. So let's take a minute here, and I'm going to now back up to the beginning and walk through the timeline of events at a high level. All right, let's go to the very beginning.